The report findings underscore the importance of healthy ecosystems and rich biodiversity in addressing climate change. Our next discussant, Attorney Angela Ibay, heads the Climate Change and Energy Program of the Worldwide Fund for Nature, the National Office of WWF for the Philippines. Over to you, Attorney Ibay.
Good morning to everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Firstly, I'd like to thank, of course, the Manila Observatory, my former office. Nice to see also my former boss, Ma'am Tony, and also Sir Tony Lavinia in this panel. But thank you to the National Resilience Council, the OML Center, and the UPLB INREM for the invitation to be in this panel discussion. Of course, I'd like to thank the efforts of our national scientists who work tirelessly in this working group to report, to bring to us a real picture of what is happening on the ground. And in fact, we've seen that these are dire and extreme consequences that we're seeing, impacts, but solutions and pathways are still very much available to us if we act very fast and in a concerted effort. And I think from our end, this is where we would like to take off. When the report itself mentions integrated, inclusive, and equitable solutions from a civil society perspective, these are terms that resonate very well with us. Inclusiveness, because that means you're involving all stakeholders. Equitable, because not everyone is able to enjoy either the benefits or the impacts themselves, and their vulnerabilities are very much different. Therefore, any solutions or actions that the government will be doing, or even us as civil society, or even those in the private sector, have to take those into account, the differences in circumstances. Integrated solutions are definitely have been the call of many of us in civil society, making inclusive multi-stakeholder processes more transparent, have also been what we've wanted across sectors. And I think this is something that many of those in the panel have also mentioned. I'd like to include also that one is, in terms of science, I'm very much happy that the national panel of technical experts have very much been engaged in this process. But I think we have to include many of our indigenous knowledge, and I'm glad that the IPCC does recognize the importance of this, and to include this more often, especially in the as mentioned by Dr. Rodel, that there will be a sort of like a Philippine reiteration of the working group report through the Philippine Climate Change I think report that the OML Center is doing along with the Climate Change Commission on adaptation. Then that, I think that would also reflect many of those evidence-based and maybe indigenous knowledge that can actually help us in terms of the adaptation aspect. But also, this is also a call for, for, as we're going to the elections, a call for politicians, whether you're currently holding your position or running for it, that really is to talk to the scientists. As we know that the climate change is happening, it's everywhere, and the impacts are being felt, even especially for us in this part of the world. It is very critical that decisions are science-based, evidence-based, and inclusive. In terms of policy, I'm glad that that the new installed commissioner had spoken earlier, and also Jerome is here in the panel. But I forgot to I don't know if I forgot to hear it, but I think it's very critical that our national adaptation plan, which hasn't been released, be also the process of developing it also be inclusive. I understand that the National Climate Change Action Plan is being updated, and from which components of adaptation will be called from it. And we therefore call for, consultations that would invite also perspectives of the different sectors, so that you can also include those perspectives, knowledge, and also evidence-based to be included in our own national adaptation plan. Our Philippine NDC does talk about adaptation, but it only talks it in the perspective of equitable adaptation action, and therefore inclusiveness has to be also included in that aspect. When we talk about policies, I'm so glad that Ma'am Tony talked about, what the business sector should be doing, because definitely including sustainability in their operations and beyond that is something to be I should therefore be a norm, and we've worked with the private sector as from our end as WWF, especially through our work with BPI Foundation, to develop studies on looking at the management of climate impacts in the role of cities. And this is where I segue to where the report says that the role of cities is very critical. I think many of us, and in the Philippines, many of us are in, I think, almost 70% of the population is now living in an urban area. It's very critical that we get our cities and municipalities that are already also experiencing impacts of climate change to imbibe really adaptation, and not just mouth the words that we're mainstreaming climate change into our actions, and really involve everyone in an integrative, inclusive manner. And that goes to where the means of implementation come in. Of course, definitely all these actions we can say and policies can be made, but the means of implementation have to be clear and have to be provided. And that goes from finance, capacity building, technology, governance, and ensuring there's an enabling environment for everyone to really participate in making our country resilient. And that includes also the communication aspect that was earlier mentioned. And for us, we would like to see that even our education system imbibes sustainable development. We realized in working for us in WWF, in working on environmental education, we have to go beyond not just environmental education, but it's really also education for sustainable development, so that we all get all of the necessary sustainable development goals included in our education system. And lastly, since we represent, I'm here also speaking for civil society, is really getting people engagement and mobilization. And at the end of the day, it's also getting us to have that behavioral change. If adaptation is something that we will be doing, then it also has to be something that we should be imbibing on a daily basis. And I think there are many points to be gathered from this report, and I'm so glad that we have this opportunity to share some of the points that we have. Thank you.